Hello everyone, my name is Mohammad Akif and I'm a senior architect at Microsoft. I'm very pleased to have Floyd here with me, who's the author of EJB Design Patterns and a co-author of Mastering Enterprise Java Beans. Hello Floyd, how are you doing?
Very good, thank you.
Thank you for doing this interview with us. You have written one of the most influential Java books, perhaps one of the most influential software books ever. So by any measure that you are a leader in our IT industry on the Java side. But more than that, I think what really interested us in you was the fact that you are a leader of the people. You have really energized people into these vibrant online communities. You launched the Serverside.com and then the Serverside.net. So why don't you start by telling us about yourself and your time at the Serverside?
Okay, thank you, Mohammad. So Serverside started in 2000. Actually, I was a university student at the time. And I met Ed Roman at a conference in California, who had just written the first edition of Mastering EJB. And he had an idea for a community for enterprise Java Beans developers. And I said, let's do it. So the Serverside.com eventually was born. And it's kind of funny because one of the initial names he had thought of for the site was EJBlobby.com.
I'm glad you didn't pick that one.
Yeah, that would have been pretty funny. I'm sure Rick Ross would have liked that. So we launched Serverside. And initially, the middleware company was a training company. So Serverside was kind of their way to build up a community and audience who would then be aware of middleware company. But me personally, I had a different agenda because for me, I've always been very interested in communities. I mean, when I was in high school, I ran the high school BBS before the internet. And that's something that I just always liked to do. So at Serverside, for the first 5 years, we just basically focused on creating one place where people could go to find news of what's going on in the community. We started doing videos, interviews with people at conferences, basically anything we could do to bring all the community into one site and to provide one place where people can go and track what's going on. So Serverside became quite large. At one point, it was over 400,000 unique visitors a month all over the world. And also then the Serverside.net launched in January 2004. And that also, I think, at one point reached over 50,000 visitors a month. So the Serverside was an excellent experience, and today the sites are still fairly vibrant, and that's kind of where it all began.
It's quite impressive by any measure. And now you've started a new community called InfoQ at www.infoq.com. Why don't you introduce that community to us and also tell us about how that community differs from other online communities? Okay.
So I'll briefly introduce it, and then we can go and do an online demo.
That's even better.
So InfoQ kind of arose as a vision of what a modern software community could be, and it came out of a lot of lessons learned that we had also at Serverside. For one thing, we wanted to create a community where different parts of the enterprise software community could get together in one place and track technology. So we have Java and .NET, and Ruby and SOA and Agile, all on one site. And typically, any one person who's interested in one of these communities isn't that interested in the others. But some people are interested in multiple ones. So we wanted to create a site where we can post all these, serve all these communities with news and with articles and videos and all the things that we've done, but then allow people to personalize, to pick which aspects, which communities that they want, and turn some off. So that was one of the fundamental ideas behind InfoQ is to create what I call a community of communities. And in fact, the company which owns C4 Media, of InfoQ, is called C4 Media. It's just a startup that just does InfoQ. And C4 stands for Community to the Power 4, meaning a community of communities, hence InfoQ, by the community and for the community. And that describes our editorial model, where we have actual domain experts, like people like yourself and myself, writing for the community. So that was one of the biggest differentiators. Some other differentiators are we want to take it back to the enterprise in terms of what we're covering. So we're covering topics like architecture, stuff that technical team leads, project managers, and technical architects would be interested in. We have Ajax everywhere. You got to see the site. It's quite impressive in terms of the Ajax experience there. Another big innovation that we're doing, which hasn't come out yet, is internationalization. So we want to actually launch with translations into Chinese, Japanese, and Brazilian Portuguese. So we're actually going to translate daily news into these other languages because we find that in various other countries around the world, they're a bit behind in terms of trends and technology adoption because they don't have same access to information as we do. So if you take one site whose editorial scope is to cover change and innovation in enterprise software and have that translated, then the whole world can kind of learn at the same time. And that's something I'm very excited about. We'll be launching that soon.
Yeah, that sounds excellent. And you have our best wishes for success with that. I also noticed that you have a free .NET book review to download. And of course, we all know that everybody loves free stuff. So do you want to tell us more about that free book and what that covers?
Yeah, actually, why don't we take a look?
Absolutely. Let's go there.
Okay. So here's a Vision InfoQ. And I know that on the screen monitor, you can't quite see everything. But over here in the center panel, we have daily news written by various domain experts. So over on the left sidebar here, this is actually our main innovation. Here you can actually turn off certain communities. So let's say you .NET guys, you don't want to hear about Java. So you take off the Java button here. And now, if you look if you actually refresh the screen and you look here, notice the Java item is crossed out. And here's another Java article. It's been crossed out. Now on the and another one. Now when you refresh, there actually won't be any more Java content on the site. And you probably won't see this on the camera, but in fact, now when you're looking at it, all you're going to see is Ruby.NET, SOA, and Agile. No Java. So let's say you're also not interested in Agile. Well, you can turn it off. So there, Agile's now been turned off. And now what you have is InfoQ, which only writes about .NET, SOA, and Ruby. And everything here is about .NET, SOA, and Ruby.
That's great. So I can personalize it based on my preferences.
Yes. Yes. Now, one thing that's interesting that no one's done before is that the personalization also extends into the RSS feed. So here we have an RSS feed, which you're not going to see it on the unfortunately on the video, but if you examine the feed, you'll notice it's only .NET, SOA, and Ruby, and no Agile and Java in it. So everyone gets their own individualized RSS feed. So it's a unique URL, and then when you register, you still maintain that unique URL. So that's something that no one's really doing.
In addition to the news, what other type of content are you displaying on the site?
Yeah, so there's daily news, there's articles. So here we have Ajax-driven tabs. So if I click on the articles tab, only this right bar here changes, and the advertisements. So here now we're looking at only articles. We have presentations and interviews, which at the time of this filming have not been deployed yet, but we actually have over 30 conference presentations. You're going to have like a streaming video here, and then the slides beneath it synchronized, and from a number of conferences, including some .NET. And we have over about 40 different interviews with various experts, including some people in the .NET space, which will also appear. So if you were to click on presentations, then you'd be able to pick one here, and it would appear in the center panel. And finally, we have books, and I'm very excited about books. So here you're only seeing one book, Visual Studio.NET, because we turned off Java, and there was a Java book there as well. So here's this book we have for free download, Visual Studio.NET Tips and Tricks. It's a book by Min Nguyen, and it's an excellent book, just covering how to maximize your use of Visual Studio. It's been downloaded over 12,000 times so far, and it's only been up on the site for a month.
Wow!
So it's a great book, and it's free. And if you like it, then buy it and support the author. So we're publishing a number of more books in the next little while. We have in the next few weeks we'll be publishing Domain-Driven Design Distilled. Domain-Driven Design Quickly, which is a short version of Eric Evans' vision for domain-driven design, which is a very important topic going forward, I think, because I think we're finally at a level in the industry where we can stop getting hung up on technology and start focusing on solving business problems. And domain-driven design is a very timely topic. We also have a book on SOA, how to adopt SOA into large enterprise, coming out by Steve Jones, who's a consultant with Capgemini, and a couple of Agile books. So these are all free books. And we put these out because it helps the authors sell print versions, and also it helps the InfoQ grow as well.
I think that's an excellent idea, and I'm pretty sure that you'll get more people attracted to it once the word gets out. Yeah,
but there is one more thing I want to show you, which is the discussion threading features. We've implemented an extremely innovative form of online discussion threading, which I've never seen before. So here's an article on what is an ESB. We had some of the key experts, industry experts in the world, from all the different various vendors and groups come in and debate what is ESB. And here's a typical online tree view that you see common on many forums. The problem is you can't actually track a thread from this view. Beneath it there's a flat view. And if you scan down, you can kind of read them one by one, but you can't see who's replying to what. So what we implemented is this cool DHTML pop-up thing, where you can actually follow a thread just by hovering over it and scan from message to message. And there's even a scroll bar inside the message if it's too long. Oops. Yeah, it's a bit harder on this keyboard. But anyway, so you can come in and you can even reply in place. Actually, another cool feature of the site is if you want to log in or register, there's a little funky pop-up that does that. We don't. You don't have to go to some boring login page. We do log in as Ajax. And you just log in here on the spot, and it's done. You can start working. So we've done a lot of cool little features like that make the site better. So I'm very excited about it. InfoQ is really our vision for what a modern software development community can be like. So for you guys in the .NET community, we're covering .NET on a regular basis. Here's the latest news item here about the MSDN Architecture Center launching vertical sites for industries and a summary of a debate about naming conventions. So it's really a site we're trying to build to serve the community.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
You've written a book on patterns, and I wanted to ask you, how do you feel that patterns are, what do you feel about patterns-based development? How important do you think they are to software development, and how do you think they have changed over the last few years?
Okay. So I wrote the book EJB Design Patterns, which came out in 2002, and was a pretty popular book for its time. It's already out of date, which actually is kind of a reflection of the fact that it wasn't really a patterns book. It was a patterns book, but the technology, it was based on a specific technology, which has now changed completely. That's enterprise Java Beans. But I think patterns are very important. One of the main advantages that they provide is a way to distill knowledge between generations of software developers. So you have people who've gone through a project, seen the same thing multiple times, documented it in the form of a pattern, which really captures the problems, the forces, and the consequences in the design. And then other people can start out and read it. In some ways, I think patterns are almost like cheating. If you're someone fresh out of school and you want to become an expert, you can read patterns books and gain all the experiences of the elders, so to speak. Another important benefit of patterns is that they provide a common vocabulary that architects and developers can use. So how often have you found yourself having a discussion about something only to realize that you both had different assumptions or had a different meaning for something, like a false semantic, and you wasted so much time. But if you had a common vocabulary given by patterns, then you can optimize for that.
Okay, that's a great idea. And again, in the same context of patterns, one of the things that I've seen, for example, in the patterns book that are available is that they only go to a certain level of depth and leave out things like exception handling, etc., that are quite critical. They almost seem to resolve some of the very common scenarios. So what are your feelings about that? Do we need to do more detailed work in patterns, and at what point too much detail basically destroys the purpose of having a generalized pattern?
Interesting. Well, there's good patterns and there's bad patterns. I mean, some of the most long-lived patterns books are the ones that are not specific to any one technology necessarily. So some of the detailed items like you would actually get in my book were quite detailed and quite down to the metal, as you would describe with exceptions. But it only lasted as long as EJB 2.0 itself, and now it's deprecated somewhat. So the big patterns, like the Gang of Four patterns books, those are all fairly timeless. I mean, the factory pattern, that'll be around no matter what you do. So exception handling, I mean, even that is somewhat technology specific. I mean, a lot of patterns with exception handling where you have static checked exceptions will only be relevant to languages where you have that. I mean, those patterns won't be relevant to Ruby programmers, for example. But there are patterns, even at that low level, like how to do proper exception handling. You may not find them in patterns books, but they're out there. I mean, there's these conferences called PLOPs, Pattern Language. I forget what the OP stands for, but there are places where people submit very specific patterns and discuss them. And another thing to keep in mind is that there's a difference between a pattern and a best practice and tips. So patterns tend to be things that are recognized multiple times across multiple projects and can be generalized, whereas best practices don't throw runtime exceptions instead of static exceptions for basically project stopping, for basically things that you cannot resolve, is a best practice that has started to emerge. But it's not quite a pattern, though, right?
Okay, thank you for that. One of the questions that I've heard from a number of our audiences, and actually a number of people that knew that you were going to get interviewed for Channel 9, it basically boils down to they wanted to know, how did you do it? I mean, fresh out of the college, how were you able to build this wonderful community And what advice do you have for people who want to build similar type of communities? You know, maybe not the Servisides of the world and InfoQs of the world, but how can somebody go ahead and use the internet effectively to at least build a small community of people that have similar interests? Do you have some tips and tricks for them?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of patterns with regards to community building, right? A lot of it comes down to also just a general mentality. I have a number of values and principles that I think guide all the decisions that we've made. The biggest one guiding it is the principle that or the pattern is that the reader is the customer, right? So I consider that you guys reading InfoQ are like my customers, and you pay us with your time. And in return, you expect information, and you expect no BS, and don't waste your time with frivolities. You want good hardcore information. So we've always oriented ourselves around providing meaty discussion topics and meaty articles. So that's a very important one. And most media sites that try and reach developers get that wrong, because they think the advertiser is the customer, which in some ways they are, but the reader is the first customer, because that's what brings you the inventory that you can sell, right? So that's the big thing. So if you look at InfoQ, for example, it is optimized down to the pixel for the reader experience. I mean, there's almost no banner ads. The content starts right from the very top of the page, which is I've never seen on any other site. So really optimizing it for the reader. Another aspect is, in terms of general community building, is the whole maxim, if you build it, they will come, is not true. Okay. You cannot just build something cool and expect people to go. You should assume people are lazy and assume that they're greedy, and just make it very easy for them and find ways for them to find out about it, right? So don't assume, don't build your community out assuming people will be involved in order for it to succeed. Find a way to make it work and put out content without a critical mass, and then eventually the critical mass will come. A lot of the internet is about perceptions. I find that respect on the internet is hard to gain but easy to lose. So you have to really keep to your values and post quality stuff and never kind of deviate from that. Now, anyway, back to the point about critical mass. That's very important for people trying to build communities. So what I would say is you should always have a plan to involve a key group of people on a regular basis to keep the site looking busy and at least put out the perception that it's already successful. And that way people will start participating on it and start posting messages, and critical mass will come out faster. So
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy then?
Yes, it can become self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. The last question I have for you, Floyd, is I'm assuming that you've seen Channel 9, and I wanted to know what are your impressions of Channel 9? Okay,
yeah. So I've been very impressed with the content. In some ways, I found the organization kind of funny. I mean, things are kind of seem very loose and casual and disorganized. But if you look beyond the kind of, comfort factor that it looks like it was designed by developers, there's actually some really cool technology under the scenes. I'm extremely impressed by how the way tagging works and how you can click on tags and view content by tags. And in some ways, that was actually a model that we looked at for InfoQ, because on InfoQ, everything has a hierarchy of tags and topics. And for example, if you click on performance and scalability as a topic, you can see everything about that. Or you can see everything about Windows Communication Foundation by clicking on that tag. And that's actually, Channel 9 was doing a good job at that. So I think it's really excellent to be putting out so much quality video content and to organize it in this kind of reusable knowledge-based format. And that's quite interesting. And I'm also pleasantly surprised to see a company like Microsoft investing so much in putting a human face to what's going on at the company, because definitely we haven't seen any other big vendor in the middleware space do that. So that's quite nice.
Okay, so thank you very much, Floyd. I appreciate your giving time to us for this interview, and you have our very best of luck for InfoQ. I'm very sure that I would be visiting very frequently, and I'm pretty sure our audiences would do so as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.